When you want to build a sci-fi world or write a sci-fi story, what should you do first? So often in sci-fi fandom, I see people with aspirations of creating their own sci-fi setting or story, and that is a fine aspiration to have, which I heartily encourage, but far more often than not, I see people's first instinct is to begin laying out factions and systems of government and classes of warship, and sailing straight past the critical things that make your favourite sci-fi settings memorable and alive. I'm Daniel Orrett, I'm a career sci-fi writer and analyst. I've contributed material to The Expanse, Star Trek Online and more, and I'm the creator of the award-winning audio series The SOJOURN. Make yourself a cup of tea and settle in, because I want to ask the question not what a given sci-fi setting is, but rather what it is for. Recently I played through the new remaster of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and as much as I enjoyed it, I found it to also be possibly the clearest demonstration of what's changed about mainstream writing in the last 10 years. This is because the game features a number of new scenes and plot lines, all using the classic voice actors and integrated directly into the flow of the original game, but written by new writers. These scenes are by no means horrendous, and if you made an entire game at this style and quality of writing, you might not even notice any particular problem with it. But placed directly against scenes from the original story, they feel oddly soulless and dead, functional in communicating a scene and plot, even entertaining, but lacking something ephemeral that gave the original story its life. This ephemeral thing is conspicuous by its absence, and even without knowing what it is, an audience member can feel when it's not there. And I think this is the cause for so much of the criticism directed towards modern screenwriting as being lifeless and performative. The missing element is theme, intentionality and messaging. Not only the general notion of having a message, because plenty of modern shows do, and are often very blunt in deploying it, but rather being a cohesive body of work with its themes written through its every aspect, deftly and organically, to create an emotional identity. Now you may think not every show needs a theme or message it's trying to deliver, and I think this resistance is rooted in a certain misunderstanding, because not every thematically cohesive story needs to pedestal its themes at every opportunity, or even analyse them particularly deeply, but they still need to be there. Let me give you an example. Stargate, which you all know we adore at Spacedock, is a fun and light-hearted setting that is basically the very definition of accessible. It has no aspirations whatsoever of being a profound and novelistic exploration of its themes, and yet it still has deeply held themes buried beneath the surface. Think about every antagonist faction in Stargate. The Goa'uld, the Wraith, the Replicators and the Ori, they are all concerned with agency, taking it away from others to control them or to benefit from their toil. 3 of the bad guys I just mentioned are literally parasites, and all of them are driven to dominate and to exploit rather than destroy. Because Stargate is and always has been a story about false gods, about control through deception rather than force. This is why when the show switches from one villain to another, the transitions are generally smooth, and the show maintains its identity. Even the Lucian Alliance, a quite minor villain, use the Casa substance to control their population, and press gang people from their worlds for their military. You will never find this theme of stolen agency and domination absent from a Stargate show. If Stargate was to roll out a new villain faction who were, say, a powerful force of pure destruction, like the Daleks from Doctor Who, or Chaos from Warhammer, even if they wrote this new faction brilliantly, even if they wrote them better than any antagonist they'd written before, something would feel wrong, and every audience member would feel it. Even if that audience member has never thought about the show's themes for a moment. When the intentionality and theme of a story is forgotten, that story loses its identity, and in its absence is left the more hollow kind of storytelling we've become so used to in modern diluted iterations of legacy IPs. Still quite capable of being highly entertaining when it tries, but lacking the essential thematic spark around which the IP was once built, leaving it feeling ingenuine. The question you need to ask yourself when starting a sci-fi project, the first thing you need to consider with any storytelling endeavour, is what am I trying to say? Remember that the setting you're building is not an end unto itself, but rather a means to the end of saying something. Even if it's only in a simple and unobtrusive way like it is with Stargate, because it's that theme which will act as your imperative, your baseline against which to test yourself and cleave to. And it's by this measure that your world and story will find an identity and energy that makes it memorable and hopefully successful, where so many dry and themeless sci-fi stories are not. This may all sound intimidating, but it really isn't. If you take a moment to consider some of your favourite franchises and think about their themes, With only a small amount of analysis, you'll find these aspects easier to identify than you might have thought. Mass Effect does not have that title by chance, or simply because it's a cool name for a faster-than-light mechanism. It has that name because the entire series is about small choices and grand consequences. Mass Effect. The Borg from Star Trek, it's no coincidence that they are essentially the anti-Federation. They strengthen themselves through the vampiric combination of traits from countless cultures, forcibly rather than benevolently. They annihilate the cultures of those they assimilate. They take the infinite diversity in infinite combinations so cherished by the Federation and by Star Trek as a whole, and pervert it to their own ends. Thematically, they are a dark mirror. You see how by having a firmly held theme, you can simply look to its opposite extremes as a means of building out compelling antagonists that feel deeply authentic to the setting and become a part of its identity. Having a thematically charged story may sound challenging, but in the end it can make things easier, not harder, acting as a guide rope to lead you to the best possible ideas for what you're building. This is scalable to nearly any degree. I always thought the Star Wars Legends continuity from back in the day, despite having plenty of duds, was remarkably thematically cohesive for an enormous multimedia project. If you play the KOTOR games and read the Bane books, etc., especially with particular attention to groups like the Jedi and Mandalorians, you can see the universal theme of hubris and dogma written carefully through all of it. And it feels like the events of the prequel movies are being foreshadowed literally thousands of years in advance. That whole extended universe is a real testament to communication and respect between numerous authors, which I think deserves to be talked about a lot more, and could perhaps be the topic for another one of these videos in future. A great deal of that thematic cohesion is missing from newer Star Wars, with the notable exception of Andor, which is probably the most tightly written and thematically rich sci-fi series in 20 years. Bear in mind also that grand world building is not mandatory. Think of the masterpiece that is Ron Moore's Battlestar Galactica, a setting with zero interest in providing you the cultural history of the 12 colonies or the specifications of the FTL drive. There isn't a molecule of that setting which is anything other than critical and load-bearing to the one and only story it hopes to tell, and at the end of that story, it closes the book on the setting so definitively that a modern studio would struggle to resume it in the same canon if they tried. BSG is a finely tuned instrument that sticks with us so potently today thanks to just how much purpose and intent was baked into every detail of its world. It's important to ask yourself these questions first because you'll want these meditations to be built into the fabric of every nation and every character you forge, so they are all vital contributing factors to a razor-sharp and emotionally potent story. If I can bring up the SOJOURN, not so much to advertise it, as just that it's the thing I can speak most intelligently about, the themes and identity of that world existed for me long before any of its nations or planets did, because the latter follows naturally from the former. The SOJOURN is about self-definition. That's what it wishes to explore, and so the various external means by which people allow themselves to be defined need to be structurally vital to the setting. So it's only natural that there is a classist, patriotic traditionalist society built around duty and service. It's only natural that there is a whole society in the story structured around faith and identity through religion. The characters and the setting grew together, outward from the original seed of intention and purpose. And by keeping that purpose as the guiding star throughout every aspect of the setting, it maintains the identity which has found resonance with its fans. There are so many stories I'd love to tell for which the IP I've built would be fundamentally inappropriate. I'd have to build new settings designed to explore those themes, which work them into the bones of their world and characters. Because to foist upon the SOJOURN a theme it was not designed to house would be to serve that theme poorly and to damage SOJOURN's identity by making it indecisive or listless. I should mention here that it's certainly not unprecedented for a series to simply start with a cool idea and develop its themes later. Jurassic Park is a classic example of this. Michael Crichton talked about originally having the simple idea for a story where dinosaurs come back, only to quickly find himself struggling to develop a compelling story, which ultimately led him to the themes of scientific hubris that the story is now known for. It is possible for such a discovery to happen mid-flow, and for a story to find its themes in the making, but this can be a gamble of long odds, and you do yourself a massive favour by considering these things from the first moment of ideation to the end, especially for a sci-fi or fantasy setting where the themes are not only essential for the main plot, but for the fabric of the universe you are world building out. You may be a master of beautifully intricate and coordinated world building, and that is a tremendous advantage to have, a truly valuable skill. For the secondary world fiction writer, world building is both paper and pen, but it can never be the book. There has to be something more, something at its heart around which all of this orbits, something that means as much to you as you wish it to mean for the reader. Then will it be remembered. So that's the long and short of it. Think about the stories that have stuck with you, and consider why they stick with you when so much else doesn't. I'd be willing to bet you'll find a consistent thematic core to those series you love which gave them their resonance and identity. Then take a step back and look at the plans for your own world or story. Put aside the nations and the ships and the lore for a moment, and think carefully about those crucial first bricks you're going to lay, what they are and why. If you want to build a story that will be remembered, you need to begin with intention and continue as you began. This is Daniel from Spacedock, signing off.
You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate, fighter, carrier, and battleship design reference books, as well as early access to upcoming videos and wallpapers. Alternatively, become a channel member here on YouTube. To our supporters, thank you.